the program for all departments, not just the Spirit of Prophecy publishing director of the church, but everybody being involved and also latching on to this treasure that we have. So I want to just give a little historical background first of the departments. Okay, I'm trying to get this thing going here. Okay, there we go. So when we look at the history of the departments, I want us to go back to 1901 and even before 1901, how our church was structured then in terms of departments. So we had these departments set up, and for each of the departments, each one had a board. And under the board, you had then people doing various things, and it was an isolated kind of a cluster for each department. So that's how departments worked back then. And so as the work was developing, because our church here in Africa started probably around 1878, that would be kind of the first convert we hear about. And then we have a number of developments that were happening up to this point, close to 1901. So this historical background is important because this happens here in South Africa, and it affects the entire church. Because when A.T. Robinson came around the 1890s in order to set up the work here, he saw that he had very few people to work with. So he couldn't have a board for Sabbath school, a board for publishing, a board for each of the departments as the structure was. So he then wrote to the GC, please, may I be allowed to have a different structure where I can have all the departments under the conference. And so they wrote back much later, after he had already organized things here, because when the letter was received, and now I can read from the archives over there what really happened, looking at the letters back and forth. So when Elder Olsen, who was the president of the GC, received his letter, he sent it to the chair or secretary of the mission board, which was W.C. White. And then W.C. White studied it. He sent it to many other people. So it was a well-studied thing to see if this would really work. And while the study was being done, in the meantime, he was implementing things here. And so by the time the response came to him, it was already set up, and he said it was working very well. So that is how we had the departments as we know and have them today. And so it went from here to many other parts of the world, and it was adopted, and finally we have these different departments now under the executive committee of the church, under the conference, instead of separate boards. So we're excited that even the Spirit of Prophecy coordinator is now coming up to be under the local church, which is something new and exciting, that we can have a direct link now with the local church, and this is really exciting. It came a little bit late, but it came. That we have the Spirit of Prophecy voted at the last GC to have a coordinator at the local church. And this is wonderful, and I hope each church in the Northern Conference would think about having that coordinator. And I want to see that coordinator actually working to support and help other departments to access Ellen White's writings for their ministries, so that the Spirit of Prophecy coordinator at the local church becomes a resource person for the departments As they are seeking information, he should be the person who knows exactly where they can find information. If a department is looking for a specific resource, and to know sometimes whether it is there or not, that person should be knowledgeable. And if they don't know, they have a link from the local church. You have the conference. From the conference, you have the union coordinator. From the union, you have the division. And we also have a research center in Cape Town at Helderberg, where Dr. Hachalinga is the director of the center. And then it goes all the way to Kenya, where Dr. Mwesi is. So you can see all the resource persons that you can appeal for information up to the main office. So I think with this approach, we may be able to see a lot happening that will help our departments to be in tune and be able to get into the resources as we need them. Okay, I'm trying to move. Okay, easier to help. Thank you very much. Okay, let me give the first example. And I will not be able to cover every department. So we've looked at the history, and I've made a strong recommendation that the local church Spirit of Prophecy coordinator should be appointed for every church as we have it. And also that person should be a resource person for all Spirit of Prophecy materials for other departments. And now I'd like to just highlight a few departments that I can have with the time I have, in order for you to have a kind of idea of what the history of each department is and how you can get involved and get the resources for the different departments. Fine. So a brief history of Sabbath School. Sabbath School was started around 1852, where James White wrote the first Sabbath school lessons, 1852. And around that time, he organized the first Sabbath school in Rochester, New York, the same year. So that's the kind of brief background to when Sabbath school started. And this means that even before the organization of the church in 1860 with the naming, 61, the first conference, 63, the general conference, we already have Sabbath school, which is very important to note. And then Ellen White's involvement and resources, we have a number of statements from Ellen White that shows how we could really understand and have a grounding on understanding the philosophy and idea behind Sabbath school. Sabbath school in many places is really going down, and I wish we could go back to our history and see why Sabbath school was organized. So there are two important objectives according to Ellen White. One is Bible study, and the second one is Christian discipleship. And we know that a lot has developed since then. Now we have another leg, which is community outreach, and another leg, which is fellowship. So those are important legs as well that have been added later. But we started with these two as important pillars of Sabbath school. And she published a book, Sabbath School Worker, in 1895. And then Testimonies on Sabbath School Work was published in 1900. Counsels on Sabbath School, 1938. So we have these resources that we can tap into and find resource material on Sabbath School, and also to understand how Sabbath School should be run. Counsels from Ellen White are very helpful because she's giving guidance to the church. Can you move to the next slide, please? Okay, so here's the sample or image of the Sabbath school worker, which is one of Ellen White's books. And Sabbath school workers may benefit from her counsels on this. Next slide. Here's an image of the testimonies on Sabbath school work by Ellen White. And from this, we can draw on page 35 a deep interest in our Sabbath schools. Constant effort should be made by both parents, teachers, to interest the youth in matters of eternal importance. So Ellen White had a burden for the youth of the local church. She wanted to see the youth involved, the youth nurtured, the youth also involved in mission. Next slide. The same cause is frequently pursued in Sabbath school meetings. When there is no preacher present, the one who is appointed to lead meetings feel it is his duty to try to supply the lack as best as he can, and starts out with a long, prosy talk that kills the meeting on the start. You can see Ellen White was very much pointed and direct with her comments. And yet he's often distressed because there is so little interest manifested by those who attend these meetings. Is this something that's still happening today? Really? I mean, this was a long time that Ellen White wrote. Can you see how relevant Ellen White is even today? And then he sees that the interest is waning, and he begins to inquire what he shall do. To such, I would say, cease your efforts to sermonize. Many love to talk, but their speeches are long and dry. There is none of the heavenly moisture in them. I can, but let's move on. With the listeners, when such a one has charge of the meeting, he thinks that so much talking ought to do as great amount of good, but it is a positive injury. A man may be logical, he may be sound in doctrine, his instruction may contain nothing but that which is, if followed, will do good, and still his labors may be useless. Are you following? They lack the holy fire. Such a one will never see the result he desires, either in the church or in the Sabbath school, till he changes his manner of teaching. When the hearts of the workers are brought into sympathy with Christ, when he abides in them by living faith, they will not talk half as long, nor manifest one half the smartness that some do now. But what they say in love and simplicity will reach the heart, and they will be brought in close sympathy with teachers, scholars, and church members. What is Ellen White saying in essence here? Be simple. That's what she's saying. Don't complicate Sabbath school. Don't come with a dry sermon. Yeah, just be simple, practical, and meet the needs of the heart. What a challenge for Sabbath school leaders, for those who are asked to lead our Sabbath school. And it means then that Sabbath school will be an interesting place, sometimes even more than the sermon. People may want to be here, because they're interested to see and to hear that very short but direct message. Okay, next slide, please. So when we look at youth ministry, I'm moving to youth ministry now. Ellen White, her counsel can be summarized into maybe two parts. Ministry for youth, ministry by youth. Ellen White advocated for special Sabbath schools for children and youth. So from that time, that early time already in our history, Ellen White had a burden for youth and children in Sabbath school. I mean, in general, for youth in general. So, next slide, please. she says, ministers of the gospel should form a happy acquaintance with the youth of their congregations. I remember when I was a local church pastor, there were times when I felt really lacking because I did not know all the youth by name. And I wish I was able to know them all by name, children by name. And you know, the secret for that, Pastor, is to visit your members at home. And when you visit them at home, sit around the table with them, you may be able to at least identify and know each of the children. Why should not labor for youth in our borders be regarded as missionary work of the highest kind? So youth ministry, laboring for youth within our local church, our local region, should be regarded as missionary work of the highest kind. This is Ellen White talking here to pastors, to gospel workers. Next slide. The youth need more than a casual notice, more than an occasional word of encouragement. They need painstaking, prayerful, careful labor. He only whose heart is filled with love and sympathy will be able to reach those youth who are apparently careless and indifferent. Otherwise, the pastor walks in, they walk through the back door and leave him with the parents. But when the pastor is interested in the children, as he walks in, the kids want to hear what does the pastor, want to say, because they know the pastor knows me by name. Next slide. Jesus did not remain in heaven away from sorrowing and sinful, but came down to this world that he might become acquainted with the weakness, the suffering, and the temptations of the fallen race. Thank you so much. He reached us where we were, that he might lift us up. In our work for the youth, we must meet them where they are, if we would help them. Now, I want to balance things out here so that you may not think that this is the work of the pastors only. Elders, deacons, all the leaders in the church need to partner with the pastor in this work to nurture the youth. Okay? Now, from ministry to the youth, we are now looking at Ellen White on ministry by the youth. Ellen White foresaw young people taking the lead as missionaries to the world. Ellen White believed that youth can sway a mighty influence not only with their peers but also with the rest of society. Ministry by young people was a prominent factor in the early Adventist church. Now let's have a picture of how our pioneers looked like. Ellen G. White was 17 when she received her first vision. So this was a calling for ministry. So imagine a 17-year-old in the church. What role do those 17-year-olds play in our church today? I'm talking globally. What role do they play, 17-year-olds? I don't know. But we need to see how we can nurture them, involve them, because God is ready to work with them. James White was a successful public evangelist at the age of 21. Publications for Sabbatarian Adventist young people began at least by 1852 when James White was at the age of 31. He founded the periodical The Youth Instructor. So the focus on the youth in this early period is amazing as one looks at it. And we can't have less today. Uriah Smith was 21 also when he joined the editorial staff of the Review and Herald. Jane Andrews, I found this young picture. You always see him with beard and he looks like an old man. And I found this young picture of him. He began evangelistic preaching at 21. So the church is languishing for help of young men. And I want to add young women too, who will bear a courageous testimony, who will, with their ardent zeal, stir up the sluggish energies of God's people and so increase the power of the church in the world. With such an army of workers as our youth, rightly trained, might furnish now soon the message of a crucified, risen, and soon coming Savior might be carried to the whole world. Messages to Young People, page 196. Let's look at women's ministries. I want to give you a summary of Ellen White's thoughts on women's ministries. Ellen White affirms the need, legitimacy, and divine mandate for women in ministry. She sees women as receiving and exercising a wide range of spiritual gifts and filling an indispensable place on the ministerial team. I remember when women's ministries was introduced, I was in youth ministry, and I was asked to help out in women's ministries. Yes, as a director. And then the conference was working on a budget, and finally, they did have a budget. So we have seen challenging times in our church where we need to really move forward with looking at needs of our congregations. Women's participation in ministry is essential, and without it, the cause will suffer great loss. Conferences should not discourage women from qualifying themselves for ministerial work. Amen? That's weak. Some women possess gifts for the successful management of the church. So you can see these are all statements from Ellen White. From back in the time, she was already having burden for youth, for Sabbath school, for women's ministries. We should have had women's ministries a long time back already, and it started so late. Stewardship department. This is a department that I was privileged to lead at some point at conference level, and I was blessed to see how it touches many aspects of our church life, our spiritual life, and the impressions I had when I was appointed, and by reading Ellen White's counsel on stewardship, I came out with a different perspective on stewardship. We need to draw principles. If you're in stewardship, draw principles from her lifetime writings and apply those principles for today, and look at compilations for specific thematic content. Health department. Start out with Ministry of Healing. Why? Why should we start with Ministry of Healing and not counsels on diets and foods when we read Ellen White's books on health? This is a suggestion. Because when you start with Ministry of Healing, you are able to gather the principles of health that she draws from the Bible, that she draws from her visions and so on. And then you are able to see how she applies those now in counsels on diets and foods, in temperance, and in other health statements as well. So I would like to encourage every department. I may not have mentioned your department necessarily, but I would like to encourage each department to look at possibilities, first as a leader, to have access to Ellen White's writings. And once you have access to Ellen White's writings, you have to read them, because access only does not help very much. So as you read Ellen White's writings, starting with your own spiritual nurture, and then from there you look at departmental needs and how you can, in your leading, when you have committee meetings, you share. And when you have training sessions with your team, you share something from Ellen White's principles about that department, and add to many other resources that the church has put together, the manuals, the handbooks, and so on. But you have your own study of what Ellen White says about that department, and how you can understand her own principles in guiding you and leading you in doing so. So I have a few resources that I would like to share with you today. Those that are here in person will catch the worm. So you will have the materials to take with you. So I have some cards of different books. So the card has the name of the book in front, and the back it has a QR code. So when you put your phone, your smartphone on the QR code, it will take you to the website of that book. And that's the only thing you will see there. So you scan the QR code, and then you scroll down. This is Steps to Christ. You scroll down, and you'll see translations that are available languages about the author. And then you scroll further, you will see other books that are available as well. So this is a way of accessing Ellen White's writings for yourself, for your own development. Okay, this is Great Controversy. Same here. You scroll down, you see languages about the author, some information, and also the other books. So with one card, you can share with as many people as you can. As you travel, you take out the card after a conversation and you say, I have a gift for you. You may, read this book and you may find some things interesting. That way you can even keep the card, but you can share the card as well with somebody who will share with others. And so that way you will have Ellen White's writings available to as many people as needed. So this is what we would like you to start with in your departments and church members in general, everybody, whatever area of church life you're involved in. Ellen White has written so widely, and she touches so many subjects, so many topics, that I'm not sure if there's any topic except for perhaps some things that are new, that have come up more recently, that we don't have any clear direction from her on. But she really wrote on many areas. So it is a blessing for us as a church to have these writings available to us. And so this is where I will end my presentation. And I have other colleagues who will also take on other important topics. So thank you very much. May God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Sukupa. What do we say to that? And I think you will agree with me as we go through some of those quotations that the spirit of prophecy is relevant still in this day for the church. And we miss out a great deal when we don't sup from the wealth of knowledge that we do find in those writings. And so thank you once again, Doctor. And we will now move to our second presentation, and I would like to invite Dr. Theodore to come up to the front. He is the Associate Director of the E.G. White Estate at the General Conference. Can we say amen? Theodore Lev-Terov. Thank you so much. The platform is yours. God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor. It is a real privilege to be here. It's my first time in Africa, in South Africa. So thank you to my colleague, Michael. I bother him too much, so he said, you're gonna suffer, man. You have to, travel 14 hours, in a plane. But it's a delight to be here. And it's amazing when you travel and you meet people from, Adventists, right? Because you just imagine what heaven will be like. And there's some kind of connection. It just happens. So I'm grateful to be here. By the way, these little cards are amazing. So I'll tell you what my wife does, so you can do it as well. So whenever we travel, either by bus or by plane, she gets these little cards, and she gets a little thank you, cards that are not very expensive, and she puts one or two of those Ellen White cards, and she gives them to the pilot and to the stewards and so forth, and just say, thank you for serving us, and people really appreciate that. So who knows, one day some people may be in heaven because of that. So this is a very, very useful thing. All right. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the importance and place of the spirit of prophecy. And we all know, right, as Adventists, that God has blessed us by the gift of prophecy. By the way, what is the gift of prophecy? Talk to me. You know, I'm a teacher, so I like to ask questions. Okay, I know it's Sunday, okay, but what is the gift of prophecy? Why it's important? Why we talk about the importance of the gift of prophecy? Come on, talk to me. Yes. Speak louder. It's the testimony of Jesus Christ. It is God talking to us, right? I mean that's why we call it spirit of prophecy, but it's really God talking to us. So is it important to listen? But of course, it's God talking to us. So we'll spend a little time talking specifically about Ellen White, because that's at the end of time when God chose her to talk to us. You remember Revelations 12, right? I mean, God will have people that keep the commandments of God and have tested. So it's important. So let's talk a little bit about this. So which one do I press to go forward? The right one? Okay. So we as a church have accepted Ellen White, right? We believe that she has the truth, so we're not going to prove it today. It is part of our core beliefs, right? And as Michael describes, it's part of everything that we do. It's there, right? So even we have an official statement. I will not read it, but just to show you that we have it, right? It's one of our official beliefs, number 18. And it says that we as a church accept Ellen White as having the true prophetic gift. So we have established that as a church. So it is something important. And by the way, Ellen White was not only important for our church, she was also recognized by community at large. And I'm going to show you now something that came in 2015, just a few years ago. But she was listed among the 100 most influential people in the history of the United States. Particularly her contribution to education and health. And you know that we as Adventists, we are big on this, right? You go anywhere, there's a hospital or there's school and so forth. So Ellen White was listed with Smithsonian Magazine as the 100 most influential people, and that's her page. There are a couple of pages that describe her contribution to society. So we're talking not only about a person that God gave to the church to bless us, to talk to us, but also to contribute to the society. So her place and importance, it's very relevant. So let's spend a few minutes to talk about. So what I'm going to do is just give you a brief introduction, okay, and her call to ministry, because that's how God operates. He calls us, right? And I hope that you can relate, because God calls everyone. If he called Ellen White, 17 years old, sick, very shy person, I mean, he can do miracles with us, right? I mean, that's how God operates. And then we will look at some major contributions, what Ellen White had contributed for the church, okay? And then we'll finish. Who was Ellen White? I mean, probably most of you know she was born in a little village, Gorham, Maine. And there were 8 kids, and she had a twin sister. Her name was Elizabeth, but they called her Lizzie. And you know, I don't know about you. I mean, I don't have a twin, okay? But I have a friend, and they're twins. And I don't know, they're so close. So Ellen White was very close to her twin sister, Lizzie. Even after the disappointment when Lizzie left the church, left God, I mean, Ellen White wrote a lot of text messages. You know that Ellen White had text messages. You know that? I mean, she wrote it by hand, but that's how she did it, okay? So she was very close to Lizzie's, and they were the youngest. So they moved to Portland, a bigger city, because of business. You know, the family was doing a business with hats and so forth. They were Methodists by, their denomination, and that's how she grew up. These are some pictures of Gorham, the place where she was born. I mean, today the place is much different, but that's during her time. And as I said, it was much smaller place. If you go to Gorham today, the city has put this plaque there that says that this is the birthplace of Ellen White, the founder, one of the founders of the Adventist Church. So as I told you, it's recognized. We are recognized by society at large. This is Ellen White standing, and her sister Lizzie that I told you about, that they were very, very close, right? But that's how twins are, I guess. And then some pictures of Portland, Maine, where they moved, and basically most of the memories of Ellen White are from Portland, because they moved when they were little kids and so forth. Another picture of Portland. That's the church where they listened to William Miller, okay? So again, in Portland and so forth. So, you know that she had an accident. You remember that? 9 years old, she was hit. But what I want to tell you, it surprised me when I read again her story. Because usually we talk about Ellen White and her physical accident, right? She was hit in the stone and blah, blah, blah. But you know that she suffered also psychologically, emotionally. Can you imagine you lay in bed and you hear your parents talking about your death? So when I read now Ellen White, I discovered that for her it was not only the physical trouble, she also had this emotional suffering. Because she didn't know if she's gonna survive or not. And she felt terrible because she had a fear of God. She feared God. She said, I'm not good enough. I don't know if I'm gonna be saved. And you know what it does to your body? You feel depressed. So Ellen White felt that, especially after her accident, because she felt that she is not good enough. Okay, if I can change this, but I don't know where to point. Okay. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just look at this. I could never become worthy to be called a child of God. You see that? Ellen White is suffering physically, but I think it's more the emotional suffering that she goes through. And she says, I don't know if I'm going to be saved. I don't know if God loves me. You know, that kind of things. You see, I was not good enough to enter heaven. This is all in her head. So she went through all of this suffering. And I don't know why my thing is not listening to me. But can you guys change it for me? Next slide, okay? Now, in 1840, they are listening to the Millerites, okay, the family, and they become Adventist Millerites, okay, or Millerite Adventists, okay? So they accept the second coming. And her emotions are even stronger now. She becomes more afraid. Can you guess why? Why her emotions are now even stronger? And she's even more afraid. Now think of they become they become Millerite Adventists. What did the Millerites do? They expect Jesus coming, okay? So if Jesus is coming very soon and Jesus doesn't love me, what happens in her heart? Man, I am really now afraid, you see? So Ellen White it's really becoming more afraid. But then she meets this pastor called Levi Stockman, okay? And she talks to him. Actually, her mom arranges the meeting, and she talks to him. And he described to her what she writes, the love of Jesus. And for the first time, she felt that God is a friend. For the first time in her life, and I like this description. She says, this good man, Pastor Levi Stockman, told me of the love of God for his erring children. That instead of rejoicing in their destructions, he longed to draw them to himself in simple faith and trust. He dwelt upon the great love of Christ and the plan of salvation, the plan of salvation. During the few minutes in which I received instructions from Elder Stockman, I had obtained more knowledge on the subject of God's love and pitying tenderness than from all the sermons and exhortations. You get the picture. For the first time now, Ellen White is like, wow, I'm excited that I'm a Christian. By the way, we just discovered recently the grave of Levi Stockman. We didn't know. Just a few months ago. So that's my friend trying to clean it up, okay? And so forth. So, but Ellen White, for the first time, she is excited about God. Because God loves me. And it changed her life. Because what followed, you know, is the great disappointment. You know that. What is the date for the great disappointment? Come on, Adventists. October 22, 1844, right? Why do you call it great disappointment? Why is not only disappointment? Come on, talk to me. Because they wanted too much, you know, you want something too much. And when it doesn't happen, what do you happen? I mean, you're greatly disappointed. You know, I like football, real football, okay? They call it soccer in the United States, these people. I mean, they're lost, okay? But I'm talking about the ball, and you play, I mean, you're in South Africa. You know what I'm talking about. So in 2014, Liverpool, my team, okay, was supposed to win the league. I have to preach about soccer. It's part of heaven, you know. So Liverpool was supposed to win the league, and there were 3 games left. And we needed 1 point to win the league. We lost all of the 3 games. I'm telling you, you ask my wife, we had a great disappointment at my house. Because I asked her to prepare a table. I mean, you know, a great celebration after 30 years. So they experienced that because they expected Jesus to come, and he didn't come. But now Ellen White knows that God loves her. You see now? And so instead of being disappointed, I mean, she was disappointed, of course, but disillusioned, God comes to her and says, listen, now I want you to talk to the other disappointed people. And that's how her ministry begins, you see? And let me tell you, when you are disappointed, you need God to talk to you. Because we forget. I mean, have you been disappointed? We all have. I remember I was kicked out of school when I was in my 8th grade. I played piano. I mean, that was in my previous life, right? Now I only make noise. But I played piano, but during communism, you had to go to school 6 days a week, including Saturday. And I had a free Sabbath. And I was a pretty good student. But this new principal decided to make me break the Sabbath. And she asked me to go to school on Saturday. And she said, if you don't come, I'm going to kick you out. Now, being a Bulgarian, I said, lady, you cannot afford that. Because I'm too good. All right? I mean, I was one of the best, and I played for the school, and they won prizes, and during communism, they got money from the government. So I said, you cannot afford that. Now, the story is long, but the following week, and by the way, I prayed, and I was sure that God will save me. God will do the miracle. I go Monday. And she said, Ted, pick up your books. You're expelled. I was so disappointed with God. That's, I think, the only time when I told God, I don't love you. I don't think you love me. It's tough when you go through disappointment. And you need a message. And so God chooses this lady, but now she's in love with Jesus and says, I want you to go to the disappointed people. And that's how her ministry and contributions begin. okay, with her first vision. By the way, side note, it's never easy to be a prophet of God. True or false? I mean, you look at the prophets in the Bible. You know, I pray to God, I say, God, any gifts, my friend, but not prophetic gift. It's not for me. I mean, you know Elijah? I mean, this great guy, he's hiding, scared from a lady for his life. I mean, you know, Jonah, and he's upset with God because God is too loving. I mean, he argues with God, you know. I mean, can you imagine you do evangelism in Johannesburg and everybody is converted and you're upset? I mean, but that's what God had. Okay, so Ellen White went also through some time of doubt and questioning, but she's with God. In fact, she describes that in her second kind of vision, she argued with God. She said, God, listen, I'm only 17 years old. I'm not going to read it for time, okay? I'm only 17 years old. I'm very shy. And at the end she said, please take it away. Give it to somebody else. Look what she says. I looked with desire into the grave. Death appeared to me preferable to the responsibilities I should have to bear. Can you imagine? She says, Lord, I better die. Never easy to be a prophet. But God calls her and she responds. She accepts her call during a prayer meeting. So that's why it's good to pray together. Because she's together with her home church and they pray for her and she says, okay, Lord, I will do it. And she accepts the call. She committed herself fully to God and spent the rest of her life telling people about God's love. Okay, that's how her ministry began. So what are some of her most important contributions? Number one, prophetic guidance and leadership. Prophetic guidance and leadership. Now, true prophets always spoke about themselves. True? Oh, you're awake. That's good. No. They always talk about God. They pointed people to God. They said, listen, you want a relationship with God. And the Bible is full of that. So Ellen White had about 2,000 visions, dreams. She guided the church in various ways, but her most important role was to bring people to a relationship with Jesus, with God. And she pointed them constantly to God. I always tell people, you know, she wrote up so many things, as Michael describes, variety of things. But her main point was to point them to God. Let me illustrate that. Her first vision after the great disappointment, right? They're disappointed. It's sometime in December, so about a month and a half. And the purpose of her first vision was really to encourage people to look to Jesus. Look what she said. She said, I saw this path, okay? Going from earth to heaven. And on this path, she said, God's people were walking. I mean, the Adventists. And then look what she says. So she sees that. She's like, this is the Adventists. They're walking. But then she noted, if they kept their eyes fixed on Jesus, who was just before them, leading them to the city, they were safe. And you read through that vision, brother, and she's pointing them and says, don't give up on Jesus. I know you're disappointed, but don't give up on Jesus. Please keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Do you see? And she begins to guide this little disappointed group and says, because a lot of people, including her twin sister, gave up on God. It's easy to give up on God. Like me, I said, God, I don't love you, see? So you see how the gift of prophecy really served a particular purpose at that time. And of course, the vision goes, and so we'll skip that, but you get the point. So she pointed people to Jesus. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. And what happened as a result? Out of the disappointment came this little group that became known as Sabbath-keeping Adventists. And later on, what happened with this little group? Started to grow and became the Seventh-day Adventist Church. You remember when we established as a church? It's for the test. 1863. That's when we became officially a church. But you see, God used the prophetic gift to bring up a people that will proclaim the last message to the world. But that's through the gift. So prophetic guidance, leadership, that's God, of course. It's not Ellen White, but God working through Ellen White. A second example, just to show you how the gift worked. You know, in between 1848 and 1850, if you read Adventist history, they had what they call the Sabbath conferences. So those are meetings when this little group met and they began to discuss the Bible. All right? And I like to read this period because I'm Bulgarian. And during that time, they argued. All right? You like to argue? Come on, be honest. I mean, it's in Adventist tradition. We need to argue, otherwise we are dead, okay? I mean, I remember I was a student at Andrews, and at that time we were about 12 to 15 Bulgarians. Every Friday we'll get together, after, school, and we'll begin and have a worship that will turn out into arguing about, because all of us studied theology. I mean, I'm saying in a good sense, okay? We didn't fight, but we like to. So they had these conferences and they would argue. I mean, you read Ellen White, she says, we were 35 people with 1,000 opinions. All right? I mean, what do you do? But God guided through visions, through the gift of prophecy, these people to unite, to have doctrines. And that's how we came with the Sabbath and the sanctuary. You see? So prophetic guidance. So God really blessed the church even from these early years, even when there were disagreements. You know Joseph Bates. You know the name Joseph Bates, right? I mean, the guy didn't accept Ellen White in the beginning. He was, a strong man. He said, no, I need to be personally convinced. So it took him about 2 years. But God led the church, you see. So the gift of prophecy was really, really a blessing. By the way, don't think that, our theology came from Ellen White, all right? That was not her role. Her role was to bring us to Jesus and to the Bible, His Word. But they did it through Bible study. But of course, God used Ellen White to confirm and to unite. You see, he had a different role. Okay, so prophetic guidance. Number 2, mission and organization. If your church pastor stops doing mission, you better close the doors and, do something else. Because early Adventists, even before we became officially a church, everything that they did was guided by one purpose, and it was mission, the three angels message. You go to Facebook, the early Adventist Facebook. You know, brother, what is the early Adventist Facebook? They had a Facebook. It's called Review and Herald with pages, okay? But you read, you will see these guys were excited about mission, sharing the third angel's message. And Ellen White, the gift of prophecy, had a huge role in that, because Ellen White advised people and encouraged them to do mission and mission and mission. Everything that they did was related to mission. Let me illustrate. In November 1848, she had a vision, and she goes to her husband and says, James, I have a message from God. You need to begin to publish a little paper. They call it a little paper because the first issue of the Present Truth was that little, only 8 pages. But then she said, God will provide means, and by the way, they didn't have money. James White went to his friend, the publisher, and said, listen, print me 1,000 copies. He said, what about dollars? He said, you know, I don't have money, but I'll pay you later. And the guy did it because he knew that James West is an honest guy. So it became, Ellen White said, it will become like a streams of light going around the world. And it really happened. Because that was the most effective way at that time to do mission. That was their internet. That was their Zoom live streaming. That's what they did, you see. Through the gift of prophecy, God comes, and it's not Ellen White, it's God, but says, listen, I want you to be missionaries around the world, streams of light around the globe, and so forth, okay? So they started the periodical Present Truth Review and Herald. Those are the kind of the early issues, just a photo of that. And a second example, church organization. You know, when we talk about organization, we are like, oh, this is a structure. It's nothing to do with structure. They organized because they wanted to do better mission for God. And there were some people, they said, we don't want, you know, if you organize, we are Babylon, blah, 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 blah. And they had arguments back and forth in the 1860s. A lot of arguments. You go to their Facebook, you will see. They argued. But Ellen White helped the church to see the need to organize in order to fulfill the mission. She said, we need to be organized. And I have a quote here, I'll skip it. But she said, there was order in heaven, there was order during the time of Jesus, and we need order in order to do our mission more successfully. So our organization is not just because, oh, we want to be, you know, structure. It's not building. It's to organize and do mission better. You see the